hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshipper shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth.
The God of this world today, the worship person of this world today is Satan. And the people are ignorant of worshiping Satan. But it's Satan impersonating himself as the church. As the church. They worship Satan thinking that they are worshiping God through the church. But it's the way Satan has done it.
When you go to church and you're sitting there in the worship service, are your feelings being manipulated? Or are these feelings that you're getting and you think it's God? Or are they just being manipulated? Your feelings, this feeling that you get during the worship service, are you being manipulated by sound? I remember when I was a younger Christian, I used to go to church and we would sing songs and I would cry and I would get this feeling that would come. And I always associated it with the presence of God, okay? And I would get it usually during the song service and the worship service. But the only thing that really confused me was if I watched a sad movie. Remember one night I was watching a sad movie on TV and I got the same feeling. And I thought, how can I get the same feeling from a sad movie that I felt I was getting from God when I was in church in the worship service? And it just confounded me for a long time. I was watching this documentary the other day, and it was about World War II. And they were talking about a portable organ that they carried around with them. And they carried this portable organ around with them so that they could have church services whenever they needed to. And that got my mind to thinking, why do you have to have an organ to have church services? Seems like no churches, especially in the Message, any that I've ever been to, have church without first having an organ playing and piano and the congregation singing along, what we call worship service. And I've wondered, why do you have to have an organ or piano or any music at all to worship God? They worship Satan thinking that they are worshiping God through the church.
They worship Satan thinking that they are worshiping God through the church. But it's the way Satan has done it.
Isn't that an amazing statement that Brother BRAHM just said? That sincere people get up early in the morning on their day off, get all dressed up, and they go to church when they're tired and would rather be doing something else. But they go there and to worship the Lord. They think they're worshiping God, and all the time they're worshiping Satan. Isn't that amazing? How that could actually be these sincere people doing it in sincerity and yet worshiping absolutely the wrong God.
Well, humans experience pleasure from a number of different stimuli, from food, some people from money, shopping, chocolate. And in many ways, that pleasure is neurochemical in origin. So that is that chemicals are released in certain parts of our brain, really old parts of our brain, called the mesolimbic system. It's a very deep part of our brain. What the researchers showed was that music, not surprisingly, because we all know that it affects us emotionally, also releases these chemicals. The main chemical that's released in response to these stimuli is dopamine. And so, while people had previously thought that this was happening with music, nobody had actually really shown it prior to this study.
This worship that we worship in our message churches, every time we have a service, we come together and we have a worship service or a song service. Is this God's chosen way of worship? Is it possible that we're worshiping God the wrong way? I guess the only way we can find out if this is God's way of worship is to go back to the beginning and find out where this worship come from. Who started this kind of worship? Be interesting to see where that would lead to.
What the researchers showed was that music, not surprisingly, because we all know that it affects us emotionally, also releases these chemicals.
So is it possible when we're having a worship service that we're not even feeling or worshiping God, but we're worshiping Satan because we're worshiping to get a good feeling or dopamine released in our brain? Is that possible? That is the feeling we get when we're worshiping God with our music completely in control of our emotions. As we are religious people, like Cain was, we worship God for the same reason that we eat chocolate or spend money or gamble, any of these addictive things, or sex, or any of these things that release this pleasure chemical in our brain, okay, to give us pleasures. That's why when we have the song service, we all feel good, but as soon as the song service is over, it's like a wet blanket thrown over the congregation, and everybody becomes sleepy and ready for bed.